Hello everybody, it's Max with Crypto Talk Now. There's been some recent developments when it comes to Stellar and a test pilot program for a Cbdc in regards to Australia. So what is this all about? What does it entail? We're going to jump into that in today's deep dive outline. And how about this for size? Does this sound absolutely cuckoo? $10,000 per XLM? Am I pulling that out of thin air? Or is that even possible in itself in the near future or the not so distant future? We're going to get into all of that on today's outline. Here we go. So check this out for yourself, and I'm going to go ahead and blow this up a little bit more. But I want to, show you this particular site. It's actually called stocky.com, and there's some other particular sources in regards to some of the recent developments. But what I was going to state is, I'm going to show you this first because it gives you this nice outline up to present in regards to, like you see right here, Melbourne fintech Novati, who's set to launch an Aussie dollar-backed stablecoin, which is the AUDD on Stellar blockchain. Now, this was originally reported, of course, on October 12th, but again, for the purposes of this outline, it's just going to help with the flow to bring it more towards the present of what Novati has accomplished with Stellar. And I think personally, this is big, especially if you hold Stellar. We talk about this whole concept of the pathway forward for regulatory clarity and so on. You're starting to see some of these switches get turned on, and that's the big thing that we're all looking forward to. Are we getting a taste of that institutional money coming in and so on? Well, as the saying goes, you got to get that regulatory framework first. You got to get, for instance, the next big step, regulatory clarity for the institutional money to come in. But are we getting a taste of things to come here soon in regards to Stellar? Could very well be the case. So back in October, like it shows here, Aussie-backed stablecoin on Stellar blockchain. Yep, multi-channel payment company Novati is preparing to launch the AUDD in the market. The Australian dollar-backed stablecoin, like it says, will go live on the Stellar chain November 1st. So some of these things basically happen, but what about some of the most recent stuff? Again, we're going to jump into that, but the announcement in regards to Stellar Meridian FinTech Conference happened back in Rome, Italy, and states with the company revealing the new stablecoin available for direct one-to-one swaps on or of the Aussie dollars via online platform and app. Basically, that happened late last year, right? So it says it's not the first AUD-backed stablecoin to market. For example, there's some of these other particular ones, but why highlight this particular one? Well, like it says, it mentions that the Reserve Bank of Australia research for an Australian Cbdc appeared to be the first Aussie dollar stablecoin, and it was basically set to go live, like it shows on Stellar. Even they even partnered with Ripple. I know it mentions that this is a rival and so on, but I have some information in regards to that. There's this gentleman here, and he is basically, I guess you could say, like the top dog, if you will, when it comes to Novati. But like it states, AUDD is a multi-chain solution. How is it a multi-chain solution? So it says Novati partnered with, for instance, XRP earlier last year, developing a stablecoin called AUDC, and it planned for integration on Ripple's XRP ledger. But what about this whole thing in regards to Stellar, right? So we're going to get into that here in a brief moment. And what I want to show you is this particular clip here in regards to this interview. It's going to give you a broader perspective of how big this is and where we're at right now. So let's jump right into that. Here we go.
Thanks for tuning in to Finance News. I'm Melissa Damwan. Joining us again is the Chief Executive Officer of Novati Group, Peter Cook. Peter, nice to see you.
Mel, hello. Great to be back. Thank you.
Always lovely to have you here. Now, Novati has recently announced 2 deals around your stablecoin services. Talk us through it.
We've been able to announce partnerships with both Stellar and Ripple, 2 of the major cross-border blockchain networks, both based out of Silicon Valley and both with very high market capitalizations relatively. Ripple we've done a lot of work with in the past for cross-border payments, and Stellar we had started on a blockchain program with them a number of years ago, but now we're really bringing it to life. So we're building a multi-chain stablecoin service, initially on both the Ripple and Stellar chains. And in fact, what's a great thing is both Ripple and Stellar are largely funding the development work and even some of the marketing work that we do to get our stablecoin service out. So the stablecoin will be a dollar for dollar backed Australian dollar stablecoin. So we are a licensed company. We'll be running our funds in trust accounts, and then we've got an Australian dollar stablecoin named AUDC, somewhat in line with the nomenclature of the US stablecoin USDC.
I know I think a couple of weeks ago we were just talking about the role of digital assets with Novati. Can you loop that in regards to the strategy now?
So stablecoin for us is essentially a major foray into digital assets. We are still a payments company, a traditional payments company, but this now gives us a major entree between, let's call it, cryptocurrency, which goes up and down and is subject to other market forces, and real utilitarian crypto-based assets. So we build the stablecoin, it becomes part of our ecosystem or our infrastructure, which is licenses, tech, commercial partnerships, and from there we leverage and monetize for our either financial services customers or end business type customers. We will provide services out as stablecoin as a service, and also for holding and transacting of funds for things such as cross-border payments, on-ramp, off-ramp for cryptocurrencies, and other services yet to be seen. In terms of partnering with Ripple and Stellar, I mean, they are 2 of the major networks. We've been able to work with them and be a major partner of theirs in Australia. And I think that goes to a lot of the success of Novati is that we can work with these global companies and bring through significant commercial deals.
So how do you see this impact on your revenues?
Melissa, for the next year, at the least, we'll have revenues will be a number of the payments from Ripple and Stellar for their grant programs that ameliorate our tech build costs and some of our marketing costs. As we start to monetize later this year, then we'll start to get transaction fees from the stablecoin service as well.
Let's talk about your results. So I know you also recently announced some quarterly results. Talk us through the highlights.
The March quarterly results, our revenue is about 10.4 million. On a like-for-like basis with our December results, we'd gone from 6.3 million to 6.8, and then the increase from 6.8 to 10.4 was the Malaysian company ATX starting to come into our accounts. Against a prior calendar period for Novati itself, we were up about 60% quarter on quarter for the prior calendar period, and then with ATX coming in, we're now over $10 million a quarter. So, really great growth results. So we're bringing in stablecoin services. It adds to the other services that we're providing. We've been growing the company at about 50% per annum. If we continue to do that for the next 12 months, our aim is to get to cash flow positive last quarter of financial year 23 and really show the market that we will be a profitable major global payments company.
Exciting times ahead. Peter Cook, great to see you back in Sydney again.
Thanks, Melissa.
All right, so think about what was just mentioned in that interview. Let's jump back to what we have on this particular thread or outline, I should say, with what you see here. And, what's mentioned here specifically, I really thought this really stood out for this particular outline in regards to Novati and this particular CBDC rollout, right? So it says Novati for instance, is receiving extensive technology support from Stellar and Ripple as part of their respective commitments to the launch. Our intention is to add AUDD to further blockchains on a case-by-case basis. Now, it states, we believe Novati's ASX listing status, extensive regulatory licenses, and longevity in the industry will provide confidence in the AUDD in comparison to other offerings. The part above that actually is pretty good stuff because, it states right here is Novati also noted the AUDD is actually a multi-chain solution, meaning that will be able to operate on more than one blockchain. So at the end of the day, you want to see some of this stuff. Like it says, strong demand, greater choice. Novati says that AUDD has been developed to meet continued strong demand for digital currencies and improve payments services by providing a fully collateralized digital representation of just that, the Australian dollar. As far as users, look what's also mentioned here. They will be able to access AUDD through any Stellar-enabled wallet. And the aim for the token is to meet a range of use cases, including, listen to this, global remittance, near instant settlements, DeFi pairings, and more. Now, these are big things, and and for the longest time we reported on some of these concepts of cross-border payments. I mean, not just us. I mean, let's face it. I mean, there's a lot of community members who have been reporting on the same thing. People talk about Ripple with cross-border payments, Stellar, and so on, but to see some of these things being, in a test pilot and see some of it actually now go from that to like an actual real rollout where they're going to go live, what is that going to mean for some of these particular digital assets? And that's a great particular question, right? Everybody's wondering about that, Are we now going to be approaching here soon, maybe a possible utility run? I personally feel as though not quite yet, but once we get some, again, that regulatory framework, the regulatory clarity that we all need, then you better believe the big institutional money will come in. But will there be key ones that will give us a taste of things to come, or like maybe a sprinkle of what could be coming up here soon, where maybe the start of it is through CBDCs because of some of the particular technologies that are tied into it, whether it is Stellar on this particular example and so on, could very well be just that, a perfect example. It states that Novati noted that AUDD announcement follows the firm's attendance at a roundtable CBDC research relating meeting. Of course, that happened in Sydney last year, and it was organized by the RBA and the Digital Finance CRC. Now, you may be wondering, why put so much focus on something like this from, 2022? Again, it's part of this particular outline, and it's going to make more sense for you to, see the interviews and see some of these threads and so on. So as a result, let's come back to more of the modern times. This was from Crypto Newsflash over at crypto-newsflash.com. And just as plain as day, April 11th says Stellar Lumens Reserve Bank of Australia to test CBDC in billion market on Stellar blockchain to serve millions of people. Who are those people? Well, it's just that, Australia and so on. We also have some information in regards to New Zealand as well, right? So getting more into this, I want to show you this. Novati, of course, to join the CBDC pilot test program by the Reserve Bank of Australia. Stellar Lumens will be featured in the pilot. And, like it says, and harbor the many blockchain protocols that are making impressive milestones in their respective ecosystems. For instance, Stellar is making impressive headway in its own customized payment push. We know about some of this stuff, but one of Stellar Lumen's major partners, which is Novati, has announced that it has landed the approval to join the pilot test for Australia's central bank digital currency CBDC project. Now, as announced by Novati, the pilot test will also feature other participants like Digital Finance Cooperative Research Center, which is DFC RC, and also join in conjunction with the Reserve Bank of Australia. There's a lot of details in regards to this, but I do like what's mentioned here. It's paid at a 1-1 ratio with the digital Australian dollar. Based on its own design, the EAUDD will empower the users to verify the reserve of the CBDC in a way that will foster transparency across the board. On top of that, it says the EAUDD will have some spending powers and users can make use of it to purchase non-fungible tokens, NFTs. So, at the end of the day, I mean, we're seeing more of this concept of NFTs actually being used as a form of utility, not just, artistic looking JPEG, right? So it says, in order to make a charitable donation, it says, as explained, the focus of this test is to see whether a stable coin pegged to a fully backed CBDC can stir and bolster customer confidence as it relates to stablecoin. And you know what? It could very well be the case. Will Australia be the ones to really make, I guess you could say, some of these, distributed ledger technologies stand out? Will it be stellar to be one of the first to kind of get some of this done? Obviously we report on like Quant with LackChain. Again, this is stellar, and you got to keep in mind, this is pretty darn big to say the least, because as we enter into this particular point, it is not uncommon to find central banks around the world researching different feasibilities as it concerns CBDCs. Look at what it also says there. The clamor is particularly growing due to its cheaper and faster alternative that cryptocurrencies present to the average user, which largely surpasses that of fiat notes. On top of that, it's called inclusion. There's, for instance, for this purpose of this video and this deep dive, we're talking about Australia, and we understand that Australia is not a third world country, but Stellar even stands out in, third world countries and so on, because it gives those people of those particular areas what is referred to as inclusion, right? If you have a population of a lot of people who just simply don't normally have access to proper banking standards and so on, that is not being, part of the quote unquote inclusion, right? It makes it that much more difficult for them to get loans, have access to the new world of Web3, let's be honest, Web3 finance. And so, like it says here, while many Apex banks are making use of different technology other than blockchain, there have been promises from most that user privacy will be adhered to in no small measure. There's also this, more in regards to this, says retesting CBDC utility through Stellar Lumens. And, for me personally, this is some of the real good stuff. So let's get a little bit more into this. It says, while CBDCs are essentially an affair of the central banks, many are drawing the support for, or I should say, of private industry players to help expand the scope of their research. Well, what is that particular scope? Well, like it says, one of the ways to get this done is to onboard tech companies, especially those with a focus on payments like Novati. So understand this, right? This whole thing of Novati dates way back, for instance, to earlier last year. And it's nice to finally get some real big updates here recently when it comes to connecting the dots of, hey, guess what? Big update. Australia is going live with some of these, test pilots for CBDC and so on, right? So what will be the next big step? We'll get into some of that here in a bit as well. It says these private partners can best help the banks to test the utilities of their CBDCs in a way that can offer, listen to this, a real world use case that can better resonate with consumers already familiar with cryptocurrencies. It says here is where Stellar Lumens, comes into the boost to boost the role of Novati in its cooperation with the RBA. And at the end of the day, you want to see things kind of like even worded this way, right? Understand the concept of supply and demand, to boost the role of a company that has obviously heavy ties in, this concept of, Australian stable coin through a CBDC. That is pretty darn big. You want to see your particular digital asset, in this case XLM, you want to see it have that supply and demand. Like you see right here, it says, we are very excited to be selected for this first of its kind opportunity to help shape the future CBDCs and promote the use cases for high governance stablecoins in Australia. Novati's stablecoin service was created with a focus on compliance, security, and utility, all of which will support the innovative CBDC trial. Now, keep in mind, we want to get that regulatory clarity, right? That's the next big step forward, but you got to have that framework. for this project to basically, let's face it, start building with Stellar back in, and also Ripple in that light, back in during a bear market of 2022, I think was big, right? And to get some of these recent updates, for me personally, it's like, yeah, we're not into that utility run yet. The true utility run will be after we get regulatory clarity, right? Gotta get that framework going and so on. But there is so much evidence, in my opinion, to support this thesis that you can have a few things happening before that all starts coming into fruition, if you will. Could this be a perfect example of, I don't know, jump starting things, right? Could very well be, right? We understand that, there's a difference between just like a bull, these bull cycles that happen every 4 years, and a utility run. A utility run in itself, I mean, some people look at it as that is something that won't be volatile. That's something that won't have your pumps and dumps and so on. So I wanted to show you that particular quote. I'm going to jump into this next particular part. And, here it is right here. And it states, Navati AUDC operating on Stellar, right? Even on the XRPRL, right? ERC20, like it says, blockchain agnostic offering enables clients to select an array of features, allow a truly tailored white label solution. It doesn't matter if you're fintech or money services. Much like blockchain, the opportunities are limitless, safe and secure payments. Again, like I mentioned, blockchain agnostic, lower transaction fees, instant payments with fast settlements. At the end of the day, I mean, that's the way it's got to be to transfer like some of this big money. But look what's mentioned on the left side. They didn't have to include this particular image, mentioned specifically crypto, right? So why crypto, right? Well, it's because, again, enter in Stellar, for instance, right? And their technologies that they provide with, DLT and so on. Now, when we get more into this, I want to show you guys this, and this is referenced straight from Stellar themselves. How do we know that? Well, look, it's official. 750,000 followers. It's definitely Stellar org, right? It's not some fake account. So they posted this on April 18th. That was not that long ago, all right? About a week and a half ago. But again, it's from Stellar. So it says, don't snooze on their ecosystem roundup for your go-to spot for all the latest buzz and updates from companies building real-world solutions on just that. Stellar. It says on this particular thread, Navati Payments and AUDD announced their participation in a CBDC pilot to explore the potential use cases and economic benefits of the central bank digital currency in Australia. There's more about it right now. We'll go ahead and kick it into that. And, my key takeaway is like what you see right here. Congrats to Navati for participating in the CBDC pilot. Explore some of the more use cases and benefits of central bank digital currency in Australia. I mean, again, at the end of the day, they got to sell their country, if you will, on the concept. Why not test this, right? Well, some people have the feeling like, well, this is going to be shoved down their throat, kind of like some other things that were, let's face it, that was kind of not too popular, right? Taken away, I'm not going to try to make this divisive here, but, taken away, for instance, their gun ownership rights and things like that. And, some people are going to be like, I don't know if this government, the people of Australia are going to be too gung-ho about this, like a CBDC, right? How do you sell some of these people on this concept? Do you sell it to them? Or is it literally like shoved down their throat, right? I think if anything, they recognize that, there has to be some of this testing, not necessarily because it's a case of, well, we're going to see how this goes, but you got to keep in mind, is this going to be able to scale? Is there going to be, some of those seamless transactions? Is it going to be fast, reliable, low cost, right? All those particular things. You have to do a particular CBDC pilot. So I want to jump to this next part, and it's just that, right? Comes straight from AUDD, and it says, looking for digital currency that won't fluctuate in value, like we mentioned. It's got to be stable. There's different forms of stable coins, right? A lot of people feel as though it's a 1-1 ratio. Well, yeah. says, unlike other cryptocurrencies, stablecoins are backed by real assets like fiat currency. More questions. They, of course, have this whole thing about it. But, we're going to jump into this for just a moment. And it takes you to what's mentioned here. And it's just, again, it's a support page about like everything about AUDD and the verification, onboarding, and how you can get more of it. I mean, you could definitely nerd it out in that regard if you want to go here. I'm going to show you, there's just a couple things here in regards to AUDD. So I'm going to pull that up. And what I like right here is where it says, what blockchains will AUDD be available on? I mean, it's a good question. Let's jump into that. So, it states that it's, again, blockchain agnostic, but plain as day, look what's mentioned, Stellar, right? And it also says we will launch shortly on the XRP ledger as well. Two of the most reputable commercial blockchains. AUDD will also be added to Ethereum. I mean, in reality, it's like, are you kidding me? We're going to use Ethereum for that cross-border payments? Not really, right? But I mean, if anything, I think they're recognizing some of the old legacy systems that might be an issue. But in reality, for blazing fast cross-border payments with at high scale, you're not going to do it with Ethereum, right? And that's a given. I'm going to jump back to this as well, and it basically states, for instance, what are the use cases, right? And that's a good question. At the end of the day, I mean, if you're a person who lives in Australia, why AUDD, right? Is it because of government control? These are great concepts, great questions, right? So here's some of the particular answers. It says, whether you're fintech payments or cross-border provider, a global business, you could take advantage of AUDD on a modern payment solution. Why? Well, remittance. Offering an AUD stablecoin will allow for other fiat-backed stablecoins to be traded efficiently and seamlessly 24/7 on digital currency exchanges. The gateway, DeFi pairing. I mean, again, all the things that we kind of basically mentioned before, right? Stablecoins as a service. So there's that. I'm going to jump back to one more particular one. It even gives people a heads up on, Stellar, for instance, an open source blockchain protocol, as we know. I mean, it's educating people on why specifically, like, why use any of this, right? And here's a perfect example. Stellar is decentralized, fast, scalable, uniquely sustainable network for financial products and services. I mean, for those of us that follow, for instance, Stellar, we already know this, right? You're not preaching to the choir. But for people who don't, let's face it, I mean, if somebody was brand new to this concept of a CBDC in Australia, they're going to want to know about it. At least I would. I mean, there's going to be a lot of people, I get it, that they're just going to go with the flow. I mean, that's a given, but it's nice to have some education about it. So it says it is both a cross-currency transaction system and a platform for digital asset issuance designed to connect the world's financial infrastructure. Let me think about that for a moment. The world's financial infrastructure. What is that infrastructure? Well, like it says, financial institutions worldwide issue assets and settle payments on the Stellar network, which has grown to over 6 million accounts. But again, key thing, financial institutions worldwide will issue assets and settle payments on the Stellar network. So we know when we keep saying, is Stellar one of the ones to get you to, financial freedom, that generational wealth? At the end of the day, if you see statements like that and done your own research, which I'm sure most of you guys have, right? Or if you haven't, by all means, check out our live show, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, every single day, where we take deep dives called DYOR with Max, or we do other particular news updates. But the key thing is we do research together on all this stuff. Why? Because in my humble opinion, this is the generational wealth. So when we get that clarity, you're going to have big financial institutions. And the other day on the live show, we reported that the Bank of International Settlements represents something like 95%, guys, listen to this, of the central bank money. 95%? That makes them the biggest central bank of the central banks, basically speaking. They're the biggest player of the mix. So they are a big financial institution. In regards to Stellar, it says Stellar offers a unique anchor platform that allows business to integrate an API into the existing technical infrastructure and access its payment rails. AUDD is one of more than 30 fiat anchors that connect the Stellar network to the traditional banking system and the very first AUD anchor to participate in the program. That's why this is a big deal. At the end of the day, I mean, 30 fiat anchors and they connect to Stellar. They're recognized in the traditional banking system. I mean, hence why, we mentioned the whole thing with Ethereum. To me, that, again, kind of makes sense, right? Because, there's legacy systems that are in place, right? Eventually that's going to phase out. But, for them to be the very first AUD anchor to participate in the program, you better believe that's absolutely huge. How about this? AUDD's partnership with Stellar provides users around the world the opportunity to make payments and trade with other Stellar-based tokens via its on-chain decentralized exchange. Now, of course, there's a lot more information in regards to this. We're not going to jump into all that, but I want to basically interject, this other part that I want to show you, right? And again, it's just a little bit more of the use cases. So we brought up the whole thing of remittance, right? And on top of that, a gateway, you got to have a proper gateway to be low cost and, instantaneous, right? For both, domestically in Australia and as well as internationally speaking. You have to have DeFi pairing and so on. For instance, people even go purchase, I know you see, for instance, Jasmy listed there, right? Jasmy/USDT or Stellar/USDT or Stellar paired with obviously Circle. I mean, things like that make sense. Why? Because you want to have that creation of trading pairs. You want to have staking and yield farming opportunities. I'm not a big fan of yield farming personally, but I do like, for instance, earning a decent amount. I guess you could say all my yield in regards to staking. I'm just not a big fan of I guess you could say like certain DAOs that offer like insane amount of interest where it seems like, there's more coming in, or more going out than what's coming in, if you will. Hence what happened with like Terra Luna, for instance. That's a whole other story. How the stablecoin is a service, white label licensing agreements, right? I mean, they recognize all this stuff. All right, let's jump into this next part. And, again, a little bit more from Peter Cook. So he was, of course, interviewed by Financial Review. We showed you guys that, right? Peter highlights the importance of innovative banking for Australian businesses in light of SVB's collapse. I mean, it's a long interview, but I'm going to show you what, he states here. The growth of digital economy businesses is at risk if startups can't get banking services and all of the growth and subsequent efficiencies, productivity, and job growth that go alongside that. At the end of the day, I mean, if you're going to punish startups for investing into blockchain innovation, then what's the point? What's the point of like punishing them and so on? So by having a country, for instance, I'm not talking about obviously the United States, like Australia, who basically, I guess you could say they get it, there is a lot of growth, right, for these startups, right? They got to be able to have access to those particular services and so on. What does that entail? Who's it going to be with? Is it in the form of what you see here with the AUDD? So the key thing is this, when we talk about, Stellar or some other particular projects where you're using the utility, that's the main thing, the utility. Well, is it just the peer-to-peer money, the retail money? No, right? You have, for instance, small businesses, you have big businesses, startups, venture capitalists and so on who need to raise capital. Are they going to be able to have access to that capital a lot more freer and readily available to them in the form of, let's face it, whether you're for it or not, an Australian-based Cbdc and it's powered by Stellar, right? Could very well be, because if you are able to provide something that, settles instantaneously, and, these guys have access to their funds and not get hit with big fees, again, that is one of the solid use cases for even Stellar, right? Is transferring that money cross-border or even domestically and not get hit with huge fees that de-incentivize these projects to raise capital, basically speaking. So I wanted to show you guys that particular quote. On top of that, I'm going to jump into this. this, of course, is that particular interview, but I'm not going to read all this. But it's in regards to regulation, and the Associated Press asked Cook, this particular question. He says, or I should say, they say, so you're saying that sometimes that an increase in regulation doesn't necessarily lead to, sort of like better outcomes. And, Cook responds with, I think it's great in Australia that we are very highly regulated in a banking sense. So that's a positive. And Australia has a great record of banks not going under. That in itself is true. Unlike, for instance, the United States, right? For instance, in the GFC. But he says, we need the regulation to be pragmatic. What we don't need is for companies to not be able to grow and help transform their economy. And I couldn't agree more. He says, think about this. Lots of farmers are using software to improve the productivity of their business or, say, improve their carbon footprint. Perfect example is a project that we recently covered, which is Demastra. Look more into it if you want. The tokenization of agriculture, the tokenization of farmers. So it says, if the software company that's helping the farm or that mining business or whatever it is can't get bank accounts, can't pay its staff, can't receive payments or make payments, then how can it help the rest of the economy? Very true. At the end of the day, like I mentioned at the beginning of this outline, guys, it's just plain as day. It doesn't necessarily matter if it's, a third world country and so on. Obviously, Australia is not a third world country. New Zealand's not a third world country. It's inclusion. At the end of the day, you have to have inclusion through distributed ledger technologies and so on, whether it's Stellar and whatnot, right? Do you have something that is going to, like it mentions, be able to, enable, whether it's raising capital or a particular business to receive payments, make payments? How is that going to help the rest of the economy? Hence the Australian economy. Hence the concept of the AUDD stablecoin, and then this concept of a CBDC, right? So it says from the Associated Press, so as we look forward, our digital economy businesses are they at risk? And basically speaking, how are they going to get access to, for instance, a line of credit, especially when it comes to expansion, particularly stateside? And I'll read this last part because I don't want to do the whole particular thing. You're more than welcome to nerd it out. So Cook responds with this, and he says, I think lines of credit are another thing about lending and being suitable for a loan or venture funding, and that will go to their business models. I think that's two issues here. One is getting banking services and whether the banks have to report on that in terms of startup companies being eligible for loans in particular that will go to their business model, I guess, and how they pitch and who their backers are. At the end of the day, like we reported many times on the live show and also in the recorded videos, and I know this is not an XRP video, but when you think about when it comes to, that bank-to-bank money that, Ripple definitely stands out with ODL, right, on-demand liquidity. We talked about where you have, let's say, for instance, the Central Bank of Greece wants to send a cross-border overseas payment to, I always mention this, Seoul, South Korea, for instance. Well, typically speaking, in the traditional financial model of doing business, for one, before ISO 222 came about, you would have a garbled up message. Because for one, Greek in itself, think about it, right? They use a different type of alphanumeric alphabet and so on. If you went to college, it just looks really, like if you've ever been part of a fraternity, you have like alpha, beta, kappa, and you're part of that particular chapter, but it's written a certain way, right? It's not your traditional like English characters. It's similar but different. So then they request, let's say Seoul, South Korea, the bank there requests $10 trillion. But again, who's gonna get hit with the fees? It's going to be that particular central bank of, for instance, Greece, and those fees. In the past, we've got verification about that. $60 billion to move $10 trillion. That's ridiculous. Well, that basically, incentivized, banks to basically, yeah, let's try to get hop on this whole thing with Ripple, right? And we're starting to definitely see this. It's starting to really get traction. But what about Stellar? What about Stellar? I think this is the perfect example, like you saw him mention here, that, and I'll highlight this again, you know, banking services, whether the banks have to report on the terms of startup companies being eligible for loans in particular. We'll go to their business model and how they pitch and who, you know, their backers are. At the end of the day, it's going to incentivize, you know, for instance, that we say the retail money, but like, you know, the small businesses, the big businesses to have access to raising that capital and so on. So understand that there's all sorts of different use cases when it comes to these things. And in this case, in Australia, this is definitely, in my opinion, is going to incentivize these small businesses or even the big ones that, look, it's about inclusion. It's not just like, for instance, like with the farmers, they give an example on earlier. You want the farmers to have that inclusion. But what about, again, some of these particular businesses, you know, where they're raising capital and so on? If they never had incentives before because they're being punished with the old traditional system, then technically speaking, you know, that isn't inclusion. That's just basically making strict guidelines for startups to make it that much harder for them to get the funds that they need to, you know, be innovative and so on. This is the pathway forward. And if you have Stellar part of this mix, that incentivizes a whole nation, if you will. And then how about this? How about other nations to get on board with some of these particular technologies and so on? So I wanted to mention that in regards to that example. I also want to show you guys this. This is a little bit more from AUDD. So discover the essentials, or excuse me, the essential stablecoin terms to navigate the complex world of digital currencies. Let us know which terms you know, they should cover next in the comments. Excuse me. Just gotta make sure I'm not muted. And here it is. 6 stablecoin terms you should know. I mean, it's good stuff, right? It says DeFi, decentralized finance, a system of finance applications built on top of blockchain network that aims to enable peer-to-peer transactions and eliminate the need for intermediaries like banks or other financial institutions. You know, fiat, right? It's just basic stuff that you already know. Smart contracts, yield farming, all this stuff. So they give people like the educational side of things, and that's good. Because at the end of the day, for people who aren't into, you know, crypto and so on, they need to learn about this stuff, right? It's part of that adoption. Now, going close to the part where we're going to close this up, because I mean, I know this is a deep dive, and I could probably elaborate a little bit too much. I realize it on some of this stuff, but I want to get this point across on why I feel as though this is so significant. So, again, this is from Novati Group, right? It says privacy legislation is changing, and businesses need to adapt. Join our expert panel during Privacy Awareness Week, which is May 1st through the 7th. So this is still ongoing for the next 4 days to learn how companies can protect their customer information. This, again, was posted when? May 3rd, as in today, you know? So, I mean, you got some big players here. Obviously, you have 2 people from Novati. I'll blow this up a tad. George Abraham, Chief Information Security Officer, and you even have Kian Jackson, who's the GM Merchant Acquiring from Novati. So I thought I'd show you guys that as well. And then on top of that, the icing on the cake is coming up here soon. But there was a recent interview in regards to the Q1 2023 Stellar Development Foundation quarter in review. Now, on the live show, I played a lot of this particular interview. For the purposes of this video, this has been condensed to 3 minutes and 12 seconds. But let's listen to what we have here in regards to, you know, like what you see in regards to Danelle Dixon and some of the other team players from Stellar in regards to the Stellar Development Foundation quarter in review. So let me go ahead and full screen this. And I'm going to come out of the frame for just a moment as we play this. So here we go.
So Justin, you mentioned that Stellar processed over 1 billion operations last quarter. Could you speak to the scaling solutions that Stellar has in mind and how this number will be influenced when it goes up to 100x, for example?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. As I mentioned before, like scaling is definitely there are a lot of potential solutions, but in terms of which one is actually the right solution, no one in the industry has a totally clear answer yet. The two things that I talked about, which were bucket list DB and pull mode, both allow for increasing the headroom for scaling on the layer one. So Stellar itself, the ledger itself, can handle more transactions, and there's still more optimization that we can do on that level, right? But then the question is, like, once you get to a really high number of transaction, like a really high transaction volume, you do start to need to think about what you should be writing to the ledger itself and what you should be doing in other ways. And I'll say that one thing that we have worked on and released a prototype for, which is called Starlight, is payment channels. And I think that there are a lot of interesting solutions, and I won't get into them, one hop, two hop, multi-hop payment channels that will make it so that you can build different models that allow you to execute a high number, have a really high volume of transactions, and execute them in batches on the network. But then the other thing that I think we will start to see is with Soroban, it starts to open up the potential for all different kinds of layer two solutions, including, zero knowledge proofs and optimistic rollups and these kinds of things. So I think for us, there's increasing the layer one scalability. There's also payment channels. And then there's also the new kinds of technologies that Soroban will open up. And all of that is stuff that I feel like I can see it starting to come together to solve a problem that when it comes, I think we'll be ready to deal with it. But I just want to say right now, Stellar is processing 1 billion operations. So we are operating at a pretty high scale. So it's not like we have a scalability problem today that we have to deal with. Today, we are processing at scale. So these are future problems with future solutions that I'm pretty excited to see built.
Yeah, and right now the operations are sort of hard coded in terms of the number of operations for each ledger. So I think that that's another piece that we can work through. I'll just say this, because everything Justin said is covering like the different components of what we're working towards. But David Mazieres, who is the founder of the Stellar Consensus Protocol, he has every single time that I meet with him, which is once a week, the first thing he starts with is, what are we doing on scalability? And it's not because we need to focus on it like today, because we have a problem today, but his thing is always to look out to the future. So it is a really important thing. And every single week I talk to him about the different issues. The reason why we can do payment channels is because we implemented the proposals in already to the network to make it so that it's easy for these kinds of things to be built. And then it's using the protocol, what's in the protocol already, to be able to see what we need to do. So it is on our mind constantly. It's not on our mind because we're in any kind of a jam impact situation, because we're not, but because David asks me every week, I think about it constantly.
All right, so nice to be able to share that. And, some of the key things here is you like the idea that, like what you saw, for instance, this gentleman on the top right, I apologize, I don't remember his name, but he mentioned specifically this whole thing of, scalability, right? And at the end of the day, it's like you need to be able to do what? You need to be able to do just that. You got to be able to scale. So like you mentioned, it's not like they can't scale now. They are scaling now. And, he's talking about maybe some of the problems of the future. They're recognizing that immediately. You saw, or heard some of the things from Danelle Dixon addressing some of these, potential future problems. I think they're going to be more than good. So understand this, right? For the CBDC test program for Australia, that's what, again, another reason why they do the testing, because they need to see that, hey, you know what? This was a project built through Stellar. Did we have the scalability problems? No, we did not. So it was nice to see this particular review in that regard, in regards to some of the things that were reported in this interview. I want to jump into this next particular one, and that is this right here. And this again is from, CMC, actually. Let's just blow this up and scroll over to the left side. So currently speaking, Stellar Lumens is sitting at a rank of 28th. It's got a confirmed market cap of $2 billion um, 487 million. All right. On top of that, the volume is doing pretty well. Right. It's up about 27%. You know, close to, I should say close. It kind of just went right there to about roughly 41 million. Circulating supply is about 54%. You know, we have 26 billion roughly of those XLM stellar lumens, right? Max supply of 50, a little over 50 billion, like what you see here and so on. And, you know, you got to keep in mind that this, again, is a coin. They have their own particular blockchain and so on. But, I mean, sitting on under, you know, 10 cents. I mean, I last made my last bag where I doubled my position at the 8-cent mark, right? Some of you guys got into it maybe a little bit lower than that. I think maybe 7 cents, maybe even touched the sixes at one particular point. But my key takeaway is this one of those particular coins that is part of your generational wealth profile? I think it very well is. And, you know it sounds bold to state that this is one of those particular ones that could get to, like, 10,000 a coin. I feel like I firmly have stated many times, I feel like XRP definitely could. I've also stated that Stellar, if Ripple's XRP can get to 10,000 a coin at, way out in the future, right? I'm not saying it's going to happen like next year, but you better believe after we get that clarity, whenever that is, a lot of this stuff is really going to take off. So once that happens, when we do get the quote unquote clarity, will Stellar reach some of these particular price levels? Will it be 10,000 a coin? My answer is this, basically. Could very well be the case. But I will state this. If Ripple gets to 10,000 a coin, if not more, then my attitude is Stellar, you're looking at like 6,500, 7K, at least, in my opinion. But look at this. What was mentioned on, for instance, this particular site. And it's just a scenario. Don't get me wrong, right? I don't want it to sound like complete moon boy stuff. I know some people are going to say that's what it is. But look what it says. Here it is. Can Stellar Lumens reach $10,000 in the future? Like, basically speaking, $10,000 a coin. That sounds crazy, right? I mean, it really sounds like nutso stuff. But in reality, what would that entail? What would, how is this going to get done? Right? That's the bottom line. So, this guy says, yeah, it can. What most people fail to realize is that XLM was created to move value. At the end of the day, what value are they bringing to the table? The examples I gave on this outline is just that. You have to incentivize people to use the technology or use, in this case, Australia needs to sell people on this concept of a CBDC. It's not just the concept of, okay, it's a CBDC with no real use case or value or anything tied behind it. What is tied behind it? Stellar's XLM. Okay. Who is this really incentivizing? This is going to also incentivize just like regular, people. Yes. Right. They're going to use this new form of e-money, if you will. But on top of that, like what you saw in the outline, some of these people that want to raise, capital, right, for a small business, big business, you name it, or the big, I guess we could also say some of the big institutional money, right, for that cross-border payments and so on. But how much is that worth, right? That's the key thing. So it says, this includes money and all assets. The total amount of value in the world is between 700 trillion to, 1.25 quadrillion. Stellar has 50 billion coins and are sitting on 25 billion, so they can create the scarcity needed. And at the end of the day, if you were into Bitcoin, right, you understand that eventually that became scarce. Not everybody owns a full Bitcoin. Or how about this? Quant. Not everybody owns a full quant. I mean, I do, but my point is, it's like at some point people are not going to be owning, a full quant, right? Why is that? Well, because for one, maybe the price, but on top of that, those supplies. Now, I know this is not a quant video, but like it says here, They as in Stellar can create the scarcity needed. Financial institutions and governments will use XLM. It is simple math. And, this is not just some statement of like, oh, well, they could, financial institutions could use this. No, they are using this. You saw, like a perfect example of this. Like it says, and governments will use XLM. What government? Australia. What was the other one, for instance? That I didn't show you the Facebook segment. I apologize on that, but even on Facebook, it mentions straight from Novanti that it's also New Zealand. We saw another perfect example. Brazil, right, was one of the last ones we reported on in regards to a CBDC and a Stellar connection. So I do agree. It is simple math. They may share the market, like it shows here, with a couple other coins, but XLM will be a major player in the new financial system. Yeah, absolutely. People are out of their minds, and listen to this part, thinking banks and governments will move money in $10 increments. I saw that posted literally like about a month ago, where there's this whole debate. It was on crypto Twitter, but it was on Reddit, where people were like, yeah, it's going to be moved in, like $5 and $10 increments or $20 increments or $100 increments. Are you kidding me? No, it's not. So what kind of value will be there? Well, we already established that there's going to be a tremendous amount of value because, again, if you're incentivizing, people to use a utility that's tied behind it, right? It's not just like, hey, here's a CBDC and it has no technical use case other than it's just e-money, right? That is tied to this concept of remittance and it's tied into, obviously Stellar, XLM, what they provide. I just think it's pretty huge because at the end of the day, if you have something that is going to be very, very easy on the person's, checkbook, if you will. I shouldn't even use that statement anymore, right? Because checks move slow. But you get my point. You incentivize small businesses, big businesses to do just that. Use the utility at hand, whether it's AUDD through this particular, CBDC. I think it's going to be absolutely massive. And if XLM, or I should say if they're tied into this, that's big. We'll see what happens when it comes to all this. When when it comes to the concept of a CBDC for Australia and see how it works out. But I mean, if people see from other countries that look, this is working out, then the news will spread like wildfire, right? Other particular nations will, they'll be like, man, this economy is thriving, right? Then boom. Enter in, for instance, Stellar into some other particular countries. All it takes is one key player, one particular country, and so on. And again, word of mouth, right? It's always been the best way of marketing to a sense. So that concludes today's particular video on Stellar. I know it was quite the deep dive. I probably elaborate a little bit too much on this particular one, I have to be honest, but I was glad to bring it to you guys. And at the end of the day, it's Stellar news. Who doesn't want some Stellar news, right? A lot of times you don't get it daily. So like, comment, subscribe if you haven't done so already. Let me know what you thought in regards to some of this recent news. And again, guys, glad to be able to bring it to you. So over and out for now. May you all have a blessed day. We will see you on the next one.